All right. Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 143. We are honored to have back on the show Tony McMillen. He's the creator behind acclaimed works like The Augmented Fourth, Lumen, Serious Creatures, Attaboy, and now the Bleeding Tree Trilogy. Tony, this is amazing. You got something else. You have a trilogy. You were back on last summer, but now you already have 3 books. You're publishing out on that you're self-publishing, or is that on Etsy now?
It's on Etsy. I'm self-publishing. It's all me. I'm going all in on this one.
That's amazing. So talk to us about it. I said you've been on maybe about 6 months or so ago. You're on episode 89, 143. So third time. Yep, friend of the show. Yeah. You are now officially friend of the show. And so talk to us a bit about this. Talk to us a bit about your new trilogy. And this is, as you said, this has been a work in progress for quite some time as well.
Yeah, more than 10 years, and really earnestly in the last at least four or 5 years. So basically the Bleeding Tree Trilogy, these books, like I said, I've been working on them for forever. What's funny is actually being frustrated writing these is kind of what caused me to do comics in a lot of weird ways. So basically I was working on, I don't know, like the 8th draft of the first book I knew it was going to be a trilogy, but I was like, oh, this isn't right. It's not working out. And so I took a break, and I got an offer from an editor I knew who was like, hey, do you have a short horror story? And that became Augmented Fourth. That became its own book. And so writing Augmented Fourth, it kind of unlocked some ideas about writing that it kind of helped me. I was like, oh, I'm better at first person than I am at third person in general, if I could find a strong voice. And so then I went back to do Bleeding Tree, the first book, Higher Climbs of Fire, and I did it in a first person voice, and all of a sudden it started clicking. And as I was writing that, when I finally finished it, Augmented Fourth was a rarity for me, where it was a publisher wanted it just happened kind of quickly. Most of my novels take forever. And so in the interim, I was like, well, these 3 novels, the first draft of them all done, it's going to be a while, because I sent them to some people to look at it to see if they want to publish it. It's going to be a while before it gets published. I should do something. I've been drawing more, and so I started doing something which became Lumen.
Okay.
And so that was my first comic I wrote and drew myself. And all of a sudden I started getting really into that, and I started finding I really loved doing that. And so I think that Lumen was like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now at this point, at least when I started it. And so doing Lumen the whole time in the back, I'm like, I had these 3 novels, and I kept going back to them, doing new drafts, editing, changing things, moving around, looking for new publishers, looking for people to be into it. And it's finishing these books in a way gave me a lot of confidence, because I was like, I think these are good, even though I had to keep on fixing them and finessing them. I was like, I think I've become better at storytelling, and that kind of fed into the comics. But just, people are like, probably like, what are these books about? Essentially, the Bleeding Tree Trilogy, I've been telling people, it's like if Mark Twain wrote Dune.
Huh.
And yeah, and it's kind of weird, but I'm not just trying to be like, it's not just an elevator pitch. It's basically, I really love like Huckleberry Finn and a lot of his books. I love the language of them, and I Dune's actually something I only read for the first time 6 years ago.
Oh, wow.
But I read the first 4 books, got super immersed in the world, and what I love about Dune is there's so much palace intrigue. There's so many different types of characters and casts and societies and religions within this whole world. And so I try to bring this sort of like folk rock, like if Bob Dylan's Basement Tapes album was actually like a world, the weird characters that kind of inhabit that. If I can make that a whole big sprawling saga, that's what this kind of became. And so I really love the language of Mark Twain, and that was kind of a big lightning rod, and then the kind of world building of Dune, and a bunch of other stuff mixed in there. And I think it's a pretty unique package. I part of the problem with these books, I think, is kind of like trying to explain to people like what they're in for, because it's a really weird ride. I've been saying it's a folk rock fantasy Western. I've been saying it's sort of like Stephen King's Dark Tower series, just in that it takes a lot of disparate elements and like fantasy and maybe horror, but also rock and roll mythology and some stuff about religion and all kinds of stuff. It's a really weird cocktail, and it comes together, I think, in a really entertaining and unique package. So it's, I think people are, the people who have read the book, read all three books, they all seem to really enjoy it, and I'm really proud of them. I'm one of the things which is interesting is, like, I've been working on these books forever, and for this last go round, it's I basically was like, okay, I gotta get these books out. I'm gonna do them myself. I went through and did I've had editors look at this and do copy and line edits, but I went through it one more time and I was kind of worried. I was like, it's been a couple of years since I've did the last draft of these. Maybe I've moved on. Maybe they're not as good as I remember.
Right.
But I was really happily surprised. Like, no, man, these rock. I'm really excited to share these. So yeah, I think it's some of my best stuff.
So I guess the question is like for authors that are listening or people that are looking at self-publishing, you're no stranger to Kickstarter. Why did you not decide to kickstart this?
The big reason why is I think some people they overdo Kickstarter. I feel like I don't want to do more than I don't want to do more than one Kickstarter a year. If I do two, will be the max. But I kind of feel like that's pushing it a little bit, and so I kind of had to pick my projects, and so I did a Kickstarter for Attaboy, fairly recently. I think it's been like maybe 8 or 9 months at this point. I don't remember,
Right.
and so I could have done it for this, but I was like, I think I'm gonna wait. And part of that is like, it's funny. I've been sitting on these books for a long time, and I'm kind of just raring to go. But I also understand I built a small but very loyal audience for my comic books, and I think that my audience for my novels, it's not as big, but people really do enjoy those. And there's some people who are into both things, but this trilogy, I think, will sort of be a slow burn in a lot of ways. And there's 3 books, so that's kind of okay. There's gonna be a whole year of me kind of showing these books and promoting them. And I basically was like, I almost did a Kickstarter for them. I was like, I think I'm gonna wait for a different project. I did my first novel, which is self-published, and that did fine. It did well, but I kind of also feel that for Kickstarter, a visual medium like comic books is maybe a little more compelling or a better platform for it. And so I kind of was like, I think I'm gonna not do Kickstarter for this and go my own way. And also at the same time, it was a close call. I almost had a publisher for these books at the last minute when I announced the books. And somebody came back, like, who I talked to earlier, like, hey, we're interested in publishing them. I was like, okay, let's talk. And we got over the details, and I was like, it was an okay deal, but it wasn't a good enough deal for me to go, well, I can't do all of that. I basically do most of what they're offering on my own.
Right.
And I would have total control about how I promote things. And so I just figured, I think I'm just going to do this on my own. So thank you. I appreciate the offer. So that was another thing, which kind of it kind of all happened at once.
Right. So how big are the books?
They're not super long, really. Honestly, the first book is I think 210 pages. Wow. The second one's the longest. I think it's 315, and then the third one is like 230 or so. So one idea I had was like, well, maybe I'll release them all in one giant book,
Right.
But I was like, I honestly like, especially with novels. I live in Massachusetts. I work in Boston. I like to go on the train, on the subway, and have a book that's not so humongous that I can't like be comfortable with it reading a paperback and turning it around. And so I like a little smaller paperback. I do like the idea that it really was written as a trilogy. So the pauses between the books kind of make sense, that you should maybe take a little breather. If people want to go crazy and binge it, that's awesome too. But I think that them being smaller paperbacks, it also makes it so I can sell them at a cheaper, it doesn't cost me a lot of money. So they're all $10 a piece.
Right.
And I'm doing a deal now. If you buy from my Etsy store, you can get all 3 for $25.
Right. That's
so,
a deal. Yeah.
I think it's a pretty good deal. I thought of, it's basically, to me, it's comparable to one big hardcover book would probably be about $25, maybe $30. And, I might in the future do a really deluxe big hardcover edition that has all three collected into one big book, maybe some illustrations or something. I haven't decided, but at this point, I really like the idea of these little paperbacks that, like, Jeff Vandermeer did his trilogy a few years ago, the Southern Reach trilogy. Had a book on Annihilation, and a few other books. They're really cool, and they're slimmer volumes, and I enjoyed those. And the big question for me was actually, do I release all my books at once, or do I stagger them and have them like every 3 months, every 4 months? And that was a tough choice, but I decided, I think I'm gonna. There's less. If I release them all at once, there's less of a drawback. I think it's like people could get them all at once, or they could try book one and then go back to the other one. So I was like, I think there's less to lose, so I'll just go for it. And also, I can offer a bundle kind of deal.
Now, do you feel, because you're, artist, writer, musician, how much do you, I think we might have talked about this before as well, is there a soundtrack that you've kind of made for yourself for this series?
Oh, for this one, yeah, there definitely is. But it's funny. So a big part of the book is the main character. Her name is Mal Leatherberry. She's a folk singer. And so in this world, it's like a primitive kind of future. She's this heretic rebel folk singer who records these songs, which are sort of protest songs against the evil church which runs the world. And so part of the book is that her voice is this uncommon, almost inhuman sounding voice. And the book opens with she's being hung on a tree by 6 guitar strings. Someone has strung her up, and she's, looks like she's going to die. The strings break. She falls to the ground with blood everywhere, and she's screaming out. And all of a sudden, her voice becomes something like inhuman, and that becomes her singing voice. And so it's sort of like it might have some sort of supernatural sway to it too. Like it might control people. And so part of my challenge was like, I was going to do a book trailer for it, and I was like, I could record some cool songs. And I was like, I don't want people to actually have a voice. Like, I don't want to record what my version of her voice is, because I want it to be something you basically, it's almost like H.P. Lovecraft's description of his creatures, where it's like, you can't imagine what the sounds like. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with her voice. And so, so the soundtrack, to my mind, there's lots of Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan's probably like the first thing I think of, especially his big trilogy of Blonde on Blonde, Bring It All Back Home, and Highway 61 Revisited. Those are the core, but a lot of his work in general, he has a really great imagery, and his voice and the actual backing music is part of it. But also Patti Smith. When I was writing a lot of this stuff, I listened to a bunch of different music, and the last scene of the last book, I listened to this one song like 40 times in a row. It was Queens of the Stone Age, I Appear Missing. And I've done that before with certain scenes where I just want to get into a certain mindset, and so I just hit repeat on my computer, and it might be 3-4 hours, who knows, and so the song will just keep playing. So I got into a weird hypnotized kind of fugue state to write the scene. And I remember at the end, I had also just finished writing the 3rd book of this whole trilogy, which I've taken me basically 10 years or more to finish. I actually cried. I was just like, hope this is a good scene. I just feel like I'm just spent, and I feel like I've been with these characters for so long, and the song was playing, I was really feeling it. But there's a bunch of music like that, which I think informs this old blues, like Lead Belly, stuff like that. But it's fun. Like the book itself, it sort of takes up that sort of Mark Twain antebellum era, but it's a future, and it's not exactly steampunk, but it has there's a lot of acoustic guitars, and there's sort of that kind of folk blues mentality. But as the books go on, there's going to be even weirder stuff, and part of like what I like about Dune is there's sort of like sci-fi instruments, things that aren't like things we're familiar with. So it makes you just kind of imagine, like, what does that sound like? And including Mal's voice, which is supposed to be, who knows what it sounds like.
Now, do you see, my other question too is like, is there anybody thought about putting some illustrations in this? And if so, does it match your style of artwork? Or would you say, you know what, I think I have a, you know, a friend or a peer that I really like their work and I'd like them to be the visual, you know, be the visual
Right.
in charge of this.
You know, like I could see my style actually fitting this story. The
Mm,
problem with me is that for novels, I don't want to depict an illustration any of the characters, especially their faces,
right,
because I think part of the power of a novel and the written word is that you're not locked into an image.
right,
And so, of course, comics, you have kind of the best of both worlds. There's an image, but you know, it's not a movie, so you can have some leeway. Your imagination can fill in certain gaps. But a novel, you know, so I wouldn't want to draw Mal. I wouldn't want to draw some of the characters, but so it's like what? So I would have to find a really creative solution. So like Augmented Fourth, for instance, I did illustrations for that book, and it's a novel. But the illustrations are actually all the album artwork of the fictional band within the story.
right,
So
right,
the album artwork would sort of reflect what's actually happening in the chapter we're reading, but I would never depict the characters. And then my first book, Nefarious Twit, it was a book about like a Shel Silverstein-esque kids book author. So the illustrations were the illustrations from his kids' books. And again, they would sort of mirror what was happening in the story, but I never depicted any of the characters. And so in this one, I was like, I don't have a cool way in yet. And
right.
so that was something. And also, after doing the 3 novels, I was like, that's a lot of illustrations. I got comics to draw.
Yeah.
I got. I'll put that in the back burner for maybe a big deluxe edition. Like, so it'd be tough. I think there's a way for me to do it. But I think something like my style would work because my style is kind of dark and scratchy, and this world is kind of dirty and grimy. But also, I think there's a lot. Like if I did color illustrations, which I don't know if I could do. There's a lot of color in this story. There's a sort of a mental telepathy sort of thing that people enter into the story, and they call it the gray. And when you enter in the gray, everything gets dimmed down, but then you and the person who's in charge of the gray, you guys you guys burn with color. And so I describe it looking like an oil slick rainbow and looking like, you know, a Medusa jellyfish upside down writhing. There's lots of weird fun stuff like that. So I go to town and coloring and drawing stuff like that.
So do you only write stories that fit your illustrations, or have you ever written a story, or you have something, a work in progress that you know doesn't fit your illustrations?
So yeah, so far most of the stuff I've written, I've geared it towards where I think my strengths are. But I have some stuff I've been thinking about, and I'm like, oh, I know either I'm not ready for this yet, or there's somebody definitely better who could pull stuff. And when I've collaborated, like I've recently done, it's going to come out probably in a month, a one shot comic book called Bounce House Bazaar, which is an anthology book, 48
Okay.
pages. 18 pages are me writing and drawing, but the other two stories in there, I've written, but other artists have drawn, and
Oh,
so
cool.
that was really fun because like I geared it towards both those artists. So one's Ben Granoff. Ben Granoff is a great artist, and his story, I was like, okay. He actually asked him straight up, like, what do you like to draw? What do you not like to draw? It's like, I've been an artist and I've collaborated, and it's like, if someone hates motorcycles, I don't want to write a story about bikers. You know, I don't want, I really don't want to. I'm not here to. I want to challenge you, but not, make something that's just like awful for you.
Right.
And so I asked him, and then the other artist, Nicola Bonmetto, who I asked him what he was into, and they responded, and I was like, cool. And for both of them, I had some ideas, and basically I kind of like, okay, I think this idea fits you. Or uh for Ben's story, I think it was more like, okay, you told me what you like, let me think about it. Okay, I think I got something. Do you like this? And he's like, yeah. And so we went for it, and I think that's the way to go. Like I have a story, I don't know when I'll do it, but like, it's based on history. It's King of the Dudes. There's this guy who was a dandy in I believe it was like turn of the century in America, but basically he was this really fashionable top hat wearing guy who had these contests with other men in New York City about who could dress the best. And it became really cutthroat. And these men were fighting in the streets over who was like the best looking, best dressed man in New York City. And they had weird walking challenges. Like they would race, but they could not run. They could only walk. And it's all historical. And they called him the King of the Dude. And so I was like, King Dude. I was like, well, my style, in my mind, I see a clean line. I see a Michael Allred. I see Jesse Lonergan's a friend of mine, but he's also one of my favorite artists working. Somebody who can do something cleaner, and also somebody who'd be good at drawing fashion, drawing clothing, and you could go, oh, that's like Frank Quitely could probably do something like that. There's a bunch of people like Nick Darrington, I believe. Yeah, the guy he's been doing great stuff. People who actually, if they drew a certain shoe, you go, that's that shoe. If I draw a shoe, maybe you can tell it's a Converse, but you probably just go, okay, that's a foot, probably. Mine's a little more abstract, so I don't think I'd be right for that. So um, I think, yeah, I would love to work with people for certain stories which aren't me, because I think they'd be better than me.
So, like, for instance, if somebody wanted to say, I'm going to write a story about Batman and RoboCop in Victorian dresses, that would be.
Right. Oh, I could kill that.
Yeah.
Especially if it's RoboCop in profile, I'm really good at that. For some reason, I love drawing that. But yeah, but it's funny. It's like I think sometimes people who collaborate in comics, they don't think of like this the really simple stuff. Like, you should ask the other guy what he likes to draw. I mean, he might. You should really, because like you probably, if you have a story you want to tell, that's great. But your story will probably be better if you're both having a good time making it.
Right.
And I'm sure there's exceptions. It's like, sometimes there's bands or movies when people hate each other that they made amazing art. Maybe, but I'd rather just risk the nice, like, we're having a great time and it turned out really good too. I think that'd be a better way to go.
Yeah.
Oh, hey. Hey, Eli, how you doing, man?
Yeah, our mutual connection, Eli. He's just said Tony is a great speaker.
I agree.
Love to hear him talk about his comics. A great mind. It's true.
Eli is a solid dude. He's a good man, and Eli got me back to eating Taco Bell. I've been there twice since we spoke.
Do they still have that veggie? What is it? The vegetarian burrito? Like, it's just like the 7-layer, like the free fried beans and the.
They might, but you're talking to the wrong guy.
Oh yeah, you're a meat guy, huh?
I appreciate what you're doing. I think it's the right thing to do. I'm not there yet. The reason I went back there is like I hadn't been to Taco Bell in like 15 years or something crazy. I'm just not a big fast food guy. And but I was talking to Eli and my friend Pete on our old podcast, and they were talking about Taco Bell, and I was like, I haven't even tried the Dorito shell thing, and they're like, you gotta at least try that. So I went there and had like 3 of those, loved them, and I'm not saying I'm like an addict again. I'm not like going back there all the time, but it's definitely it's part of my options now if I want to eat out.
Right. That's good. Good for you. Good for you. We had I went, my wife and I went back down to our old stomping grounds in Concord, New Hampshire, and our middle class place to eat was always Ruby Tuesdays.
Yeah.
And they closed it. It's gone. Like the closest Ruby Tuesday is down in your neck of the woods. I'm going to drive like 300 miles for a Ruby Tuesday.
See, the thing, I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and so Taco Bell is sort of a really contentious thing, because basically there's plenty of great Mexican food in Tucson.
Yeah.
Taco Bell is not that. Taco Bell is very much, an Americanized, Kmart Mexican food.
Right.
But there's cool stuff within that. As long as you're not going for authentic, have at it. And so it's one of those things where like people will like, sometimes like people here in Massachusetts will be like, talking about, oh, you must like really good Mexican food, not that Taco Bell stuff. I'm like, I like them both. I mean, I've had a Mexican stepdad and he was cool with me eating either one. It's just like, what are you in the mood for? It's,
Yeah.
And he's right. Yeah, Eli, we were talking about the movie Demolition Man, and Demolition Man, a key plot point is that Taco Bell is the only restaurant in the future LA. It's a utopia, so obviously that's the way they went.
Right. See, exactly. So another thing, this is another curiosity that I'm wondering about. Have you ever, because you're an auditory person as well, would you ever have these books? Would you ever do like an audio version of it? Would you actually narrate that?
I personally, I would love to hear that. I don't think I'm a good enough orator to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's funny. I've been the lead singer of bands. I've have multiple podcasts. I've been a stand-up comedian. I actually still think from time to time will speak too fast and don't enunciate well, and I'm very critical of the way I think I do okay, but for a whole book, I think it'd wear a little thin. For Augmented Fourth, my old novel, the main character he's an English guy. He's Brummie. He's from Birmingham. I had a friend, Rick Wentworth, who did the trailer voice, and he's really good at voices. He's a podcast. He not only does podcasts, but he does like audio dramas. He can do different accents, and he's an actor. And so he did an amazing thing. So I was trying to get him to do like a full on audiobook. Just we never really hashed out the details. I would love that. And for this book, it's all done in Mal's voice. Mal Leatherberry is the main character, and so I would be really curious about what someone could do. And the one problem would be her speaking voice is supposed to be pretty weird too. It's not supposed to be like. And in my mind, her speaking voice sounds like, you see Return of the Jedi?
Yeah. Well,
okay. Yeah. Okay. I figured it was kind of silly to ask. It's like, you know about Santa Claus? Like, yeah, of course. But I was making sure. So Return of the Jedi, very beginning, Princess Leia is dressed as a bounty hunter, and she rescues Han. She has that cool voice. It's like, you in the carbonite sickness. That's I kind of imagine Mal's voice is like that the whole time. I don't think that's probably good for an audiobook. So we might have to let that dream go. But yeah, in my mind, she sounds sort of like that and like William S. Burroughs, because his voice is really weird.
Right.
Yeah.
And so talk to us a bit about too. One of the things that I wanted to chat with you about was when you were on last summer, you were talking about Attaboy that you did. I had it, loved it, and I actually sent you a review. I actually did a review. I did a blog post about it, how
loved it. Loved the review.
The philosophy behind it was amazing. Like I didn't expect to see something in like this. And I don't know if you're tapping into some zeitgeist of middle-aged guys who started playing Nintendo like now, or just like, contemplating like the existential points of mortality. But I'm reading, I thought this was just going to be fun. Like it was fun, but it was like, man, you're like really digging into some things that I only think about like at like 3:00 in the morning, and now I have to like think about it at like 3:00 in the afternoon when I read this book. Like, thanks, Tony.
Yeah, and I'm happy to ruin your day. Yeah, no,
it was good. It was really good.
Thank you.
But one of the things that you were kind of like, not sure if I'm going to do it or not, was actually because you deliberately wanted to make it treasury sized.
Yeah.
And I remember you were talking over this. I was like, I'm not sure if I want to make, because they think you lose something with. So that inner dialogue of deciding whether or not to make it into a size you actually have decided to make it a not normal size. What would you call it? Just a.
I've been saying regular size, reduced lunch. I don't know, like.
So what was the decision? How come that inner voice? How come that other one won out on you?
So partly it was like I looked at the expenses and the expenses of producing it myself, getting it made and shipped, but also expenses for people, how much it costs. And so that was one thing. So I was like, I'll make a proof and just see if it looks good, regular size. And if it looks good, I'll do it. And if it doesn't look good, then I'll have to just figure it out, And so it looked really good, actually. I thought it looked really cool. And I like both editions. I like the big edition. That's really fun. But it's also it's a little bit of a different experience, smaller. And it's funny is actually that decision, it would have been made earlier, but I was like, I'm really a stickler for good covers, and I don't think I'm a great cover artist. I think actually very few artists are great cover artists. Doing cover art sort of like a totally different art form in a lot of ways. And so I was really happy at the Attaboy cover, and I was like, I think if I do a smaller edition, it'd be cool to do a new cover. And I couldn't come up with a better cover. I was like, this is like I got something that kind of works here. I did a sort of an Eric Larson foreshortening sort of pose that's really like punchy and I don't want to say iconic, but I'm going for that. I'm going for something that's simple and striking that you could see that form and know it. Right. And so I couldn't figure out anything else. I was like, well, I'm going to keep the same cover. I was like, I'll make sure people don't think they're going to get the treasury edition if they buy the smaller version. But yeah, essentially, I was like, as long as it looks good, it's still a good experience. Yeah, I'll make it smaller, make it cheaper for me and for people to get. And I like the idea of it being. I think you get 74 pages for $12, and
Yeah,
it's
that's
complete.
amazing, dude.
Yeah, I think it's a really good value, and I think also I was thinking about it. I'm really proud of this book still, and I think it's a really cool entry point into my work. So if this is the first thing of mine you read, I think you're gonna get a value. You're gonna see what I can do, and I think it's a good introduction. To, like maybe you'll try some other stuff I've done,
Right.
and I felt like it was like I gotta do it. I feel like I love Attaboy. People have asked me because the book sold out, the big edition, and lots of picked it up. So people who wanted the book, I was like, oh, I think it's still being sold at like Gutter Pop Comics or this place, and people found it, and that's been great. Well, I'm happy he's back. I'm glad the little guy's back. I have a lot of affection for the character. I think I'll probably do something else with him at some point. Because I love my daughter who's 2 years old. I draw him. She's like Triangle Boy, or she'll say Robot. She knows kind of who he is. She likes Grape Shot better because he's Grape Man. He's a big purple eye. She gets that.
Right.
But she has, she's getting into some of the stuff I do a little bit.
So that's a good point. Like, you could easily make a sequel to this because it fits within the genre of their having, Ninja Gaiden 2, Super
Right.
Mario 2. So there is a way to, and you can even do something along the lines of like the Attaboy Jr., or something where
Yeah.
you have like, Donkey Kong Jr. or,
I was thinking, yeah, totally. And I could even do a thing where it's on a new console, so now it's a new look or something. There's a lot of things to do there. I do kind of want to do a team up book at some point, and I think it'd be really fun to have Attaboy and Esteban from Lumen, and maybe a few other characters kind of meet up and do something. And I'm kind of thinking ideas. It's funny. Lumen's one of those things where I thought about this with when I finished Lumen, I did 4 issues. I actually drew a 5th issue because my idea was, well, I think I have like 25 issues of ideas. I should just make the series. And then I did issue 5. I was like, well, I don't know if I want to do a monthly book. Like, I don't know if I can't really do a monthly book. It'll be like a semi-monthly, as close as possible. But I also am like, I don't know if I want this to be like Spectacular Spider-Man, where it's like, oh, the soap opera picks up. Maybe it's better as like Hellboy, where it's like these little short kind of stories. And that was like a learning thing. I was like, I think I'm that guy. I write novels and I write stories that have a beginning and an end. But I would want to go back to the Lumen world at some point. And Attaboy's the same thing, where I'm like, there's more to do. There's more fun to be had, I think. And it's funny. It's like these new books, the Bleeding Tree Trilogy. You can read this if you've never read any of my stuff, and I think you'll totally have a good time and enjoy it. But these books connect everything I've ever done, with the exception of the Friday the 13th bootleg comic I just did, because that's a bootleg of a licensed property that has nothing to do with these probably. But there's these new books sort of deal with parallel universes and multiverse kind of stuff. And there's been seeds of all these books and everything I've done, including Attaboy, including Lumen, including Augmented Fourth, including back to Nefarious Twit, my first novel, Oblivion Suite, a comic book I did of Kenlina Rufin. There's like little morsels. So if there's anyone who's been paying attention, when they read this book, they're gonna go, "Oh, wow, that's pretty neat." And if you haven't, or you don't pay that much attention, it's okay. You're gonna totally get the story. It's fine. But I think it's a nice little thing. It's funny. These books were sort of like, the plan was to do Nefarious Twit novel, Augmented Fourth. Actually, it was basically supposed to be Nefarious Twit than this.
Right.
And I couldn't get it right. And so Augmented Fourth happened, and then Lumen happened, and then Attaboy happened. And basically,
Serious Creatures.
Exactly. Serious Creatures too. I forgot.
Yeah, so many things you
I'm pretty happy about that. But yeah, you're Serious Creatures has a little bit of involvement in this, and I think it's gonna be, if you read these books, I think you'll get like a cool little extra layer to all the other books.
So I got a good throwaway idea for you, Tony, that you could do with this. That reminds me of the Attaboy. What you could do. So this is the way, because you're like, it doesn't. What about doing like a fake, like Super Smash Brothers type booklet where you actually have all your major IPs as like a Street Fighter kind of thing, where you can actually
I
like.
I love it. Like it's funny. One of my projects, which I don't think it's going to happen. So I'll just talk about what the idea was. I was going to do a thing with a bunch of different artists, and it was going to be called Melee on Main Street. And the
Uh-huh.
idea was a booklet for a fighting game, like a Street Fighter game, but it's in the suburbs. And so your player would be like disgruntled janitor, or it'd be like noisy neighbor or whatever. And I'd give it to different artists, and basically. I thought the idea would be, oh, cool. I just ask people to do pinups basically, and I'll do character descriptions. It'll be fun. And eventually I got soured on that because I was like, well, it's basically a book of pinups for characters that no one knows about. It's not exactly like the most compelling thing, but I love fighting games. I especially love I think some fighting games I grew up on, like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, they actually have pretty cool stories somewhere in there. Like the mythology behind some of the stuff is cool. So I would love to have my characters like all meet up in the Smash Brothers thing. Like I honestly have already thought of like how Attaboy and Esteban from Lumen could meet.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I have some characters that I haven't shown anybody yet. Like Behemoth is one, and there's all these other characters which kind of fit in that world. And the new character Grape Shot, he could be in there. I even thought it'd be cool to do. I'll still probably do it as a 4-page throwaway story where Bobby Feckle from Serious Creatures, he does special effects for movies. The story starts out as a Lumen story. You see Esteban in the armored, and then all of a sudden he meets Attaboy, and then something happens. All of a sudden it goes cut. It's a movie set. It's Bobby Feckle doing the effects, and you get to see my 3 main protagonists so far kind of all together on set together.
Right.
But I only got so much time on this earth, so I will get to that I think some point, but not yet.
So my other question, I wanted to before we run out of the hour, I wanted to ask you about. So is there going to be a season 2 of your podcast? Too young for this SHIT?
Not yet. So I'm
Okay.
doing another podcast called 5-Star Autopsy, which I'm doing solo, and that's nothing against my buddy Peter Leon. Still he's my best friend. He's my co-host for Too Young for This SHIT. We will probably get back to that at some point. It was a lot of fun doing that show about action movies. It was just a lot of work getting, because we had guests for every episode, sometimes multiple guests.
Right.
People live in different time zones. It was a lot of work to kind of, as you know, to get people together. And so 5-Star Autopsy, my new show where I examine the cause of death for the greatest creative runs in pop culture history. Like, when did the Beatles stop making great albums is an example. I do this all on my own. And so I was sort of inspired by Rob Liefeld's podcast, because Rob Liefeld does that all solo. And he's like, he's like a 55-year-old guy who sounds like a 14-year-old. His energy is off the chart. I don't have that. I'm probably a 40-year-old guy who sounds like maybe a 39-year-old at best. So I am trying my best to bring up the energy as best I can. But that's been the new endeavor. And this is something that's sort of like spurred on by cartoonist kayfabe. It's one of that show that I think a lot of people who are in comic books have gotten into, and I've also been inspired by. These comic creators are upping their profile by doing a show which is tangentially related to what they do, but they're not just like talking about their own work. It's providing entertainment, and if people want to check out who these guys are, who have these opinions, they can seek out their work. And so that's part of what I'm doing. But it's also I like this stuff. 5-Star Autopsy, it's really about consecutive runs of greatness from different artists. So I'm looking at musicians, film directors, novelists, comic book creators. I just did Frank Miller, and basically I've always thought about, like, I'm not a sports guy at all, but my version of that sort of thing is like thinking about, it's really great when an artist can do like 3 great works in a row, but when they kind of they have a bad work or a dud, it's really interesting if they kind of come back, or they don't, or they have a bad spell, and why that could be. And so I kind of like the first one I did is Led Zeppelin, because that was sort of as a kid, the first time I kind of understood, oh, you have a whole career, and like, maybe everything is good up until this point, and then maybe it kind of drops off. And and of course these are my opinions. So I'm also, for this show, I'm gonna do a thing I think called Second Opinions, where I'm sort of like a morgue. I'm sort of like a coroner here. So I'll have another coroner come in and go, No, Tony's totally mistaken. Frank Miller had one good work. It was this, and then he stopped. You know, like Tony was almost right, but this one that he called it dead was actually really good. And we're just kind of, we'll go back and forth.
So how long do the episodes last? Are they like 30 minutes, an hour?
Mostly they're an hour plus, but which is kind of
Wow.
crazy. It is just me, but yeah, I guess I get going. I get going.
Yeah.
And it's been fun, but it's also like and I people seem to be into it, and I haven't made anyone too mad. I'm not trying to, but some of these artists are people who really love, and I
Right.
love all these artists, but I am just trying to be honest about what I think their best work, and then maybe their not so great work is.
Right. So,
Yeah,
the basis of this is that there is a definitive end to the career, basically, or did they ebbs and flows, or
there's ebbs and flows. I just said the Doors, and the Doors. What's interesting about the Doors is there is a definitive end because Jim Morrison died, and so
right,
the band broke up, and so they're one of the few acts where it's like, well, it's like a real story. There's a narrative that just kind of ends, but and Led Zeppelin also broke up, so that's maybe true. But I did John Carpenter, and John Carpenter's still alive. He could make another movie. I go through his whole career and go, well, I feel like he hasn't made a good one in a while, but who knows? I would love for him to come back and rise, again. I'm going to do Spielberg. And what's fun about a lot of these things, like, I think a lot of the greats, they have great runs, but they're not as long as you might think. Like Spielberg, for instance, for my money, Jaws is maybe a perfect film. I love Jaws. Close Encounters, great. He does 1941. 1941, not good. I rewatched it recently because I was like, it can't be that. It's pretty bad. 1941 is terrible. But he comes roaring back. So his run's only those two movies, but then he comes roaring back. Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then he does E.T. He's doing good. Temple of Doom, maybe not as good as Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T., but still pretty good. And so he's got ups and downs. But Spielberg, of course, is still this huge filmmaker. But its consecutive runs are a lot harder to pull off.
right?
Like the Rolling Stones have had a million albums. I think they only have a run of 4 great ones at one period in their career, and then they have kind of spotty. That's really good. Not so good. Not so good. Pretty good. That's really good. It's tough. And that's kind of the fun. That's the game of it.
So I'm just kind of curious. I mean, I'll have to listen to it. But for John Carpenter? Did you say his run kind of ended at Escape from L.A. or before that?
So before that, but he has some good ones. He has some isolated greatness. So my opinion, if I remember correctly, it was I believe that Dark Star, his first film, does not start the real run of greatness. That's it's interesting film, but it's sort of a prototype, right? Assault on Precinct 13, awesome. You see where he's going. Halloween, it's a phenomenon. It's a really interesting film, really great. That continues to run. I think he, like Spielberg, his number 3. It's I think The Fog is actually not as good as I would like it to be. I think The Fog, great cinematography, really cool setup, really good story. I think the ensemble cast doesn't really work. I think the characters aren't really there. The story isn't that scary for the most part. So I think The Fog is kind of a dud. But then he comes right back. Escape from New York.
Right.
Escape from New York is great.
And
then The Thing is the masterpiece. From that and Halloween are probably the ones that I think people would argue those are the ones you can't really argue with. Those are the masterpieces.
Oh, I would have said Big Trouble in Little China is probably
Big Trouble in Little China is definitely in my personal that's my number 3 or maybe my number 2 movie. But that's not so. Then you have Starman, which I think is just okay. Christine, just okay. And then I think Big Trouble comes in, and Big Trouble's great, but it's kind of isolated. And the same thing goes for like In the Mouth of Madness. I think is great, but that's kind of isolated. They Live, really good. There's always kind of a bad one before that, and so I think his last great one was In the Mouth of Madness, and then he's had some ups, mostly downs from my money.
Yeah, Ghosts of Mars. That was
yeah. Ghost of Mars is too bad because like on paper that sounds cool. It's like, oh, you're going to do a sci-fi version of Assault on Precinct 13, basically. That's right. Could be awesome. I feel like he just wasn't that into it or something. It doesn't feel like there's energy there. Right. Escape from LA too. Like Escape from LA, I think should have been amazing. I love the ending. I think I think John Carpenter is really good at endings, but I don't think it's up to snuff with the first one. Right. I think there's a great cast. There's Bruce Campbell has a cool small role, Pam Grier, but I just don't think it hits.
It's so hard, right? It's so hard to pull off sequels.
Yeah, and also filmmaking is a huge collaborative art form. There's so many moving parts. I think it's amazing to get anything made and get it made well. I have no, at least a comic book, you could do it mostly on your own, and so you might be more consistent because it's just one person mostly.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's so cool. So is this gonna be kind of you're gonna be doing this as it goes, or do you have any plans on?
I'm going to do at least 10 episodes for the first season, so I'm going to do probably record one tomorrow for the director Wes Anderson's next. I like to do yeah, I love Wes Anderson, so I like to do, like, if I do a director, the next thing I do is a musician, or I don't want to do the two of the same sort of mediums in a row.
Right.
But basically, I'm episode 4, so I'm going to keep it going to episode 10, and then I'll probably take a break, and as long as I keep having fun, I'll keep coming back to it, I think.
Right. Cool. So your book it's on pre-release, right? It's on pre-order right now.
Yep.
And the order now, will arrive in about a month, right? Between March 20th. So when does it open for sale?
So basically, you could order it now, but it should be available for sale. I think April 1st. I think, or if not earlier. I'm basically waiting to get one more final look at a proof, and then I print out the ones I want, and it's going to be available on Amazon.com as well. So you can order from me and get a discount and a signed copy, or you go to Amazon and you can get them there as well. But those things are raring to go. Basically, I am super excited, and I've also offered the first book. You can read the first book for free digitally. Oh, wow. The whole book. There's links on my Facebook, but basically, you can try the first book and see if you like it. That's one of the things which is cool about self-publishing is, like, I talked to the guy, the company I was talking to about publishing these books. I like, what do you think of this idea? And he's like, that could work, but we just don't do that usually. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, why not? He's like, it's tricky. He's like, we're kind of old fashioned in some ways. And he's like, I could see that working for you. If you're doing it for your Etsy shop or whatever, he's like, that could work. And I was like, well, yeah, well, I think I'm going to do it like that. Cause I figured it's 3 books. Right. If you get the first book and you like it, chances are you'll get the other 2 to finish the story. And I've had success with some free stuff too. I've issue 1 of Lumen, Serious Creatures. Issue 1 is free on my site. I did a Jason Friday the 13th bootleg comic, which is free on my site. You can read it and you can download it. And I got a lot of people who I think have never seen my stuff. They saw that and they have gone back and bought some books of mine, which is cool.
Wow, cool. Well, that's awesome. Congratulations, Tony. I'm excited to check that out. Also excited that you got more things, as I say. Then you got your Attaboy, normal size. What did we call it?
Non-gigantic. Yeah.
And then so what after this? What else are you working on?
So the next thing is going to be only a month away. It's going to be called Bounce House Bazaar. This is a one-shot anthology. So it's me doing a character called Grape Shot. Nicola Bonmetto, who's an awesome Italian artist who lives in Spain. He's drawing a book we worked on called Sawn-Off Shogun. So Sawn-Off Shogun, it's crazy violent, really awesome action stuff in feudal Japan. And then me and Ben Granoff are doing a story called A Theater Near You, which is sort of a slice of life meets horror story about movie theaters. And I'm also going to include a little 4-page story about the Summer of Batman, Tim Burton, that I did myself, just a little auto-bio thing. But all of that for $6, 48 pages, like just tons of fun action, kind of one and done stories all together. So Bounce House Bazaar, that'll be on my site. Really excited to show that because I think that's going to be it's cool to be like showing myself as an artist and writer, but also just collaborating with other people and seeing their takes on things.
Right. Awesome. So that's cool. So congratulations on that coming out too.
Thanks, man. Yeah. And after that, Serious Creatures 2, this year is going to be the 2nd volume of that. So 6 more issues, which will finish the story. And then I'm going to just take a break. I'm going to chill out.
Yeah, great. And so, and if people want to see more of the stuff, they can go to your website, TonyMcMillen.com, correct?
Yep. And there's links to my shops there, my Instagram, all the stuff you can find me. But yeah, please do.
All right. Excellent. Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much. And right there, as you say, you click on the blog page on TonyMcMillen.com, and that's where you can see read my first new novel for free. So it's right there.
Yeah. Barney, thanks again, man. It's awesome. I always have a good time here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, excellent. I appreciate it too. Great. So before we jump on, I gotta say, you said, and I don't know if you said it in passing, and when you're on the second time, I don't know if you remember this. Do you ever have those situations where you would say something and you forgot about it, but then the person you said it to, like, will always remember it?
Yeah. I've had the reversal too. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. You made a joke by saying, you know what, if I said, hey, thanks for having me back on, and I want to be on at least 3 times because then I could be considered friend of the show.
Yeah. I don't remember that at all, but I believe
you said that. So I said, you know what? That's actually interesting. So what I did, and I wanted to announce this when you came on for a third time, I created a link that says friend of the show. So on here, every single person who's been on at least 3 times is here, and you're on there. So I didn't want to announce it until I had the person who mentioned the joke about
I don't want to cry on air, but I am touched. I really appreciate it, Barn. That's great. Yeah, it's awesome. I don't know if I've been on any show 3 times. Maybe one other show, but that show is nothing compared to this show. So,
well, I gotta say, so I wanted to announce that. I'll put a tweet about it and stuff. But I wanted to make sure that I officially announced it on your third. And just so you know, I already created a page because we both have a Squarespace account. You use Squarespace, so do I. I already got a page. It's called the 5 Timers Club. Just like Saturday Night Live. So I'm already prepared for when people come on at least 5 times. So.
When I introduce myself to people, I'm gonna start with this. I'm gonna like, hey, by the way, I've been on storycomic.com 3 times, working on 5. Like, my name's Tony. What do you do?
Yeah. See,
yeah.
I'll send you a PNG file of the friend of the show logo so you can add it to your.
Put my phone, like a vaccine card and that, and so like, I'm good. Let me in.